Hello everybody, Jeremy Dickinson here. Thanks for watching. So in this video what I want to do is kind of give a primer, an initial primer to what philosophy is. And so what I want to do is just, for the novice, for the person who's taken his or her first philosophy class or classes, or someone who's just generally curious about what philosophy is, I want to give just a kind of general overview of what philosophy is by looking at its three main subdisciplines. I'll let you do some homework on what the term philosophy means. The term philosophy, as it traces back to the ancient Greek language, has an important meaning, but this video is just going to sidestep that and focus really on the three main subdisciplines of philosophy. There are others, of course, but these are three of the main ones that I want to just highlight in this video. So I'm going to talk about metaphysics, I'm going to talk about epistemology, and I'm going to talk about ethics. Metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Two of those three are probably likely easy for you to spell. The middle one, epistemology, I'll spell it out for you in a moment. So, metaphysics, okay? Metaphysics concerns existence and the nature of what exists. That's very general, okay? Metaphysics concerns existence and the nature of what exists. Okay, that's all abstract. Let me give some examples. So, metaphysicians historically have been concerned with topics like, does God exist? Okay? You see, that's an existence question. We're concerned with the existence of the big G, God. Does the soul exist, right? And if the soul exists, does it survive death, okay? Does free will exist, okay? Why does anything exist as opposed to nothing exists? Okay, so these are four or more central questions that metaphysicians, so we don't call them metaphysicists, we call them metaphysicians, in philosophy, are concerned with. So the metaphysicians concerned with these big picture questions. There's a whole host of others. Right? The list could really go on and on and on. But in the interests of time, those are four central ones that philosophers have been interested in. As I mentioned, metaphysics is about existence, reality, and the natures of the things that exist. And so when philosophers are concerned with whether or not God exists, they also want to know the nature of the thing that they're claiming exists or doesn't exist, right? So got to make sure that they're on the same page, sort of conceptually speaking. But suppose someone argues that God does exist, right? Suppose their argument were successful, right? That may be impossible, but just work with me. Suppose their argument were successful. The metaphysician needs to give an account of what the nature of this being God is in the first place. Likewise, if someone argues for the existence of free will, establishes the existence of free will, right? That philosopher, that metaphysician's got to give you an account of what free will amounts to. Like, what feature of the world is it? Okay, what feature of us is it, for example? Okay, so that is supposed to give you just a very broad, rapid-fire sense of what metaphysics is, okay? Epistemology. So this might be a term that you've never even heard before. At least with respect to metaphysics, you may have seen it. You've seen metaphysics sections in used bookstores, though there's not quite enough overlap between the subject matter that you're going to find there and what I just mentioned a moment ago. But epistemology, epistemology, epistemology. Okay, episteme is a term that we get from the ancient Greek language, which means knowledge, and then the last part is related to logos, so ology, so epistemology. Study of the theories of knowledge. Something like that is sort of the standard way of understanding what epistemology is. So when an epistemologist does epistemology, what she tries to do is give an account of what knowledge is, regardless of whether or not we have it, but give an account of the phenomenon. Like, what is it to know? What is it to be in a mental state of knowing? What distinguishes being a state of knowing between being a state of belief, or a state of hope, or a state of desire, right, or state of wishing or willing, etc., etc. So knowledge seems to be its own kind of mental state that we're in, and it seems very, very important for us. We go around all the time saying that we know this, we know that. Okay, and I'm sure there's many things that you know, unless you're a skeptic. A skeptic denies that we have knowledge, so that's a nice segue. Epistemologists who claim that we have knowledge, they tend to be confronted pretty immediately with a figure or a philosopher, right, who's skeptically minded, who wants to say, are you sure that you know? So once you sort of work out the conditions for knowledge and you say that, oh, we satisfy those conditions, the skeptic comes along and says, oh, no, you don't, and here's why. And now we're off to the races, and debates between the skeptic and the anti-skeptic emerge. And epistemology, it's about a lot of different things, but that's one of the central things that's been about in the history of philosophy. Okay, and it covers many, many different domains. Now, as I mentioned, the skeptic can be someone who's like a global skeptic who says that we don't have any knowledge, or knowledge is impossible for X, Y, and Z reasons. Okay, but you can be a local skeptic and say, oh, we have knowledge with respect to these domains, but we don't have knowledge in these other domains. Okay, so they can be more local skeptics. There's different kinds of skeptics. Okay, so in epistemology, got to give an account of what knowledge is, what distinguishes being in a state of knowledge compared to being in other states, and then asking the question, do we satisfy the conditions for knowledge? If so, what's the argument? If not, what's the skeptical argument opposed? And then suppose you end up claiming that we do have knowledge, you need to explain how much of it we have and how it is that we in fact gain it. Like, is it through our senses only, or can we use our reason as well? Is it both, or is it just one of them? Are there other ways in which we can know things, perhaps by reliable testimony from other people? Okay, so you hopefully you're getting a sense, like this is what philosophers are interested in when they do epistemology. So you get the metaphysics, you get the epistemology, absolutely crucial. And you can see the connection, can't you? Imagine somebody argues that the soul exists, right? It survives death. You can imagine the immediate question being, how do you know that, right? That's an epistemological question, right, based on a metaphysical argument, for example. Okay, so metaphysics and epistemology, their connections seem to be pretty clear, excuse me. Ethics, that was a third main subdiscipline of philosophy that I wanted to introduce in this rapid-fire introduction to philosophy. Ethics is concerned with, here we go, good, bad, right, and wrong. Okay, good and bad, right, and wrong. Those are the four central concepts that I'm going to introduce this time. There are others, of course, but for the purposes of introducing ethics, why not start there? And maybe you're thinking ethics and morality, do you think those are the same thing? Okay, many philosophers agree with you on that. We can go ahead and run with that. There may be arguments that challenge that claim, but ethics, morality, okay, or moral philosophy, we can use those interchangeably for our purposes in this video. Okay, so ethics, as I mentioned before, good, bad, right, and wrong, the four central concepts to just note for this time. So philosophers want to give an account of what counts as good, and many philosophers, when they're doing this, they're kind of, at least in many cases, kind of following what we ordinarily think. I mean, there's some who come along and say, well, there's what we ordinarily think, but then philosophy needs to clean things up, and there's debates about these methodologies. So what counts as valuable? And so we think about something being valuable, you should be thinking about it being good. And the idea here is that we want to try to live good lives. In order to live good lives, we need to have good stuff in them. Well, what counts as good? And it gets more complicated, but that's just sort of like an initial first pass way of thinking about why the ethicist is interested in thinking about good and bad, because we want to live good lives, and good lives, just intuitively speaking, have good things in them. Well, so then what things count as good? Okay, so philosophers want to give, who do ethics, ethicists, want to give good accounts of good and bad. Of course, thinking about badness, those are things that we want to avoid. We want to avoid the bad life, or living bad lives, and so bad lives are going to be ones that are full of badness. So usually if you figure out what counts as good, it's not too difficult to figure out what counts as bad. It's just going to be the opposite. So if you say happiness is what's good, or counts as good anyways, it's one of the things that counts as good anyways, then unhappiness is going to count as bad. Okay, and of course you can develop various lists. Just that important to do philosophy, you got to have some kind of argument for why it is that you are maintaining what you're maintaining. Okay, now so there's good and bad, and then there's right and wrong in the theory of ethics. So when we think about rightness, you can think about what you should do. It's like anytime you're faced with a situation, what's the right thing to do, right? Too many rights there, but work with me. We think about what the right thing to do. You should be thinking about what you should do. Okay, what's the right thing to do? Well, that's what you should do. That's what you're obligated to do. Okay, and so there's a tight connection between that which is right and that which is what you should do, and that's what ethicists have commonly, dominantly believed. And so it might turn out that when you're working out an account of what counts as right, you're working out an account of sort of our obligations, right, or those oughts that we have to live up to. So if you think that the right thing to do in a circumstance is tell the truth, even though it may bring a little bit of embarrassment, but it's not a life or death situation, then the right thing to do is tell the truth. That's what you ought to do. So what you're right to do is intimately connected with what you should do, what you're obligated to do, etc., etc. Okay, and conversely, when thinking about wrong, what's wrong to do is what you shouldn't do, what you ought not do, etc., etc. Okay. Now, so in an ethical theory, sort of the next big thing that would be done, sort of if you're working in the order that I'm stipulating now, is work out the relationship between the two things. You want to live a good life. That means you need to, acquire the good things. Now, does that mean that acquiring the good things is what you ought to do? So is acquiring the good things the right thing to do? Okay, so many philosophers want to say that, yeah, basically what we ought to do is going to be exclusively determined by the things that contribute to one living a good life. And others are going to disagree with that, and some may even maintain that there's no really necessary connection holding between the two. Okay, so we don't need to deal with those issues now. I just want to kind of lay them out there. They're important in other videos I've done on ethics, and so if you watch some of my other videos, you'll see that this is kind of a point that I mention here and there, and I do so in more detail, so it might be more helpful. But anyways, now we have the three main subdisciplines kind of just laid out there, and I did this kind of rapid fire on purpose just to give you a general introduction. Once again, metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Okay, they're all sort of distinct when we lay them out in these ways. But as you can imagine, when you develop a philosophical worldview, they're going to be interrelated. As I already kind of captured with the idea of thinking about the relationship between metaphysics and epistemology. You work out the metaphysics, and you can imagine somebody saying, well, how do you know that you've captured reality as it is? Okay, and then likewise, when you work out an ethical theory, you have good and bad and right and wrong. Well, you can imagine somebody saying, are those parts of reality? Right? Are the things that you're claiming good objectively part of reality, or are these things that we're just kind of making up? And there's huge debates about this. But you see how when you ask that question, the questions I just asked a moment ago, like, are those parts of reality, right? Are they objective, right? Or are we just making things up? Those are metaphysical questions about these ethical issues, right? So metaphysics and ethics are related in this intimate way, as noted. Now imagine you're able to provide an argument that says that no, what counts as good is objective, and here's why you should think that. Okay, you can imagine someone coming along and saying, how do you know that? Like, what makes your argument so good, right? Can you tell me your argument, right, in a better way or clearer way, more convincing way? Those are all epistemological, responses to metaphysical claims about what exists, ethically speaking, if anything, of course. Okay, so three main subdisciplines, can lay them out in sort of these distinct terms, but they are all interrelated, it seems, at least at various points when one develops a philosophical worldview. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions about anything that I said, please hit me up by asking it below, sending me an email at jedickin@syr.edu or jadickin@calpoly.edu. All right. Thanks for watching once again, and talk to you soon.